dare you try and outfox the Snorkel Killer? Welcome to my review for The Snorkel. You'll find all my other Hammer reviews in my Hammer playlist, and there will be spoilers today. So this is an interesting thriller because it gives away its main mystery in the first 5 minutes. We pick up the story, which I knew nothing about, by the way, coming into this, with a guy literally in the process of murdering his wife. She's drugged and lying on the sofa in the extravagant-looking sitting room that they own together, and he's pottering around the room, setting up the scene so that it looks like she killed herself by turning the gas lamps on. Now, the clever part of this plan is that once he's done with what he's doing, he puts on a snorkel and goes into a crawl space beneath the floorboards. And the idea is that when the police turn up, they'll presume it's a suicide because all the doors and windows are locked from the inside, so a killer couldn't possibly have got in. But the thing is, the killer's never left. He's there underneath the floor throughout the police investigation. I kind of feel like if this was real life, he wouldn't have got away with this. The police would have checked for hidey holes and looked under the rug and seen the very obvious trapdoor there. But the detective in this film is not very good. He acts a bit like an all-seeing Poirot, but he's not very thorough. The whole setup of this reminds me of an episode of Columbo, that show that ran throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s. In every episode of Columbo, we would always see who the killer is right at the start, and we'd also see just how meticulous they were at not leaving any clues for Columbo to follow. So the enjoyment was seeing exactly how he would solve the mystery. I once heard it said of Columbo that it wasn't so much a whodunit show as a how do you catch him, and that's what The Snorkel is. The main mystery to be solved is, okay, we know who the killer is and what they've done, but how are they going to be brought down? Will they be brought down in this instance? I mean, maybe they won't be. It's a one-off film. Maybe it will go for the more bleak ending. There's also the question of, why has this guy just killed his wife? She looks like a pretty good-looking woman to my eyes, so there's that question to be resolved as well. So even though a big mystery is given away at the start, there are still questions that need addressing and sorting out. There's plenty still to enjoy potentially throughout the rest of the movie. The whole thing was directed by Guy Green. I don't recognise any of his other films on his filmography, but clearly he was a very old school director. He did his first movie in 1933. I'm not even sure that there would have been dialogue in films back then, and he had a really long career as well. He was still directing stuff well into the late 80s. His career is in complete contrast to the three main actors in this, all of whom, for one reason or another, did not last that long in Hollywood. The main guy who plays the killer with the snorkel, Peter Van Eyck, he did a lot of movies, but he sadly passed away when he was still in his 50s. And the two main women in this, neither of whom are the dead body on the couch in the beginning. One of them is Mandy Miller, who was in a lot of films as a child and a young teenager, but for some reason she decided to retire from acting when she was like 18, 19. She was having a good career at the time. This was actually her last movie, so when you see her driving away at the end, that is her saying goodbye to Hollywood. It's kind of weird. And the other main actress in this, Betta St, kind of a similar deal. She did 2 more movies after this in her case, and then she retired, and she was only about 30, 31. So if you watch this film and you don't recognise anybody in it, it's not necessarily because you have a lack of film knowledge. You are just literally watching a group of very talented people who, for one reason or another, did not have very long careers. Looking back on this film as a whole, I think it's a very clever film, just not necessarily a very exciting one. I think one of the problems with it is the selection of characters on offer, or lack of. The main killer is not very good. I found him very frustrating to watch. He looks very sinister when you look at the cover art on the Blu-ray box, but he's like a poor man's Robert Shaw. Getting to see him demonstrate his sociopathic tendencies by constantly lying and deceiving the two female leads in this, I just didn't like him at all, and I don't get his motivations. I get why he killed the husband before this story begins, but I don't get at all why he then kills his new wife. We never find out the reason for that. It's kind of like this guy kills because he gets some kind of kick out of coming up with his little schemes and possibly getting away with them. I mean, that is a motivation, I suppose, albeit a very vague one. There's certainly no reason for this guy to try and kill Candy in the second half of the story. I mean, he's got away with the murder of his wife. Just enjoy life from then onwards. This guy might have even got with the Jean character if he'd have not try to kill Candy, but he just can't resist committing more murders, and it ends up proving to be his downfall. I like the use of the snorkel as a key tool in the story. It's sort of clever how he uses it to hide under the floorboards, and I like how he also uses it to try and get around the border control. So this thing that he has got multiple uses, and it's quite clever, but the character as a whole, I just didn't really like him that much. As for Candy, did not like that character either, really. I can forgive the kind of over-exuberant acting of Mandy Miller. She presumably wasn't that seasoned at this stage of her soon-to-be-ended career, sadly. But the character is very frustrating. She's way too forward in accusing Paul Decker of murder in this. I mean, if you've got no evidence, just shut the hell up. You're just bugging everybody by just continuing to go on and on about it. And there's a horrible moment where she looks out of a window and sees a poster of a movie that's just coming out, and it's got like a deep-sea diver on it, and this guy's wearing a snorkel, and she looks at this thing, and you can see the cogs turning in her head. She sort of looks at this and thinks, a snorkel, that's interesting. And then 2 minutes later, she comes away from the window, sees an actual snorkel on the floor of the bedroom she's in, i.e. it's the snorkel that Paul used to get away with murder, and she doesn't think anything of it. She just picks it up, puts it back in the wardrobe, and that's it. Now, I get that snorkels had not been around that long in the 1950s, but even so, this girl has literally just looked at a snorkel on a poster and had a bit of a light bulb moment, and then 2 seconds later she's seen the exact same object and not thought anything of it. It's just bizarre. Even if she didn't know what this thing was on the floor, she would at least look at it a little bit and get her brain going, and what a weird moment. And what's going on with the name, Candy Brown? Nobody's called Candy who's not a stripper or a lap dancer. So this character having that name is odd. She should be a Judy or a Jill or something. Candy Brown. The Betta St. John character, Jean, is probably the only semi-decent character out of the main trio, although she's very naive in terms of never once suspecting Paul throughout the movie. Candy suspects Paul too much because she's constantly going on about it, and Jean is totally the other way. I kind of feel like these characters should have been a bit greyer. You know, there should have been 1 or 2 hints here and there that Jean did maybe believe Candy, always starting to come around to Candy's point of view, and at the same time, Candy should have gone the other way, maybe just to build the tension up a bit more. Maybe there should have been some hint that she was starting to believe Paul at various points of the story. There are a couple of big scenes in the second half of the film which definitely elevate the material, and not before time, because I was a little bit nonplussed with it all during the first half. Candy's humorous mistake with the snorkel accepted. So one of these big scenes takes place on a beach. There are some gorgeous shots of the Italian coastline in this film. I didn't actually realise that it was set in Italy until I watched the audio commentary. I just presumed it was set in France, a la The Full Treatment and Taste of Fear. There's nothing in this film which makes it obvious it's set in Italy. It just feels like a generic European location, but it's not integral to the story where it's set. So this big scene on the beach, and again, Paul demonstrates here his impulsive silliness. He swims out into the ocean after Candy and tries to drown her in full view of Jean, who's sitting on the beach, and there's no way he would have got away with this with the police anyway. I mean, who's going to buy that Candy just happened to drown while she was in Paul's care 2 days after his wife died under slightly suspicious circumstances? He's pushing it a bit. The other big scene is right at the end when, again, Paul tries to kill Candy, this time using the same method that he killed his wife with. And I've got to say, the moment where I realised that the cabinet being moved had blocked Paul from getting out from under the crawl space, I just thought that was incredibly clever. I felt like clapping. It's an absolutely ingenious method of thwarting him at the very end of this story. And for one delicious moment, I did really think that Candy was going to leave him there to starve. But she then changes her mind, and funnily enough, I changed my mind about this plan at roughly the same time she did, because the more I thought about it, I thought, well, he's going to have almost a week before he starves to death, and given that the house is mostly set of wood, during that time he could find a weak spot somewhere where he can kick or punch his way out, a bit like Uma Thurman in Kill Bill 2. So maybe it's best not to risk him getting out and getting away with all the things that he's done. Maybe it's best to just forget about the killing him plan and just at least make sure that he goes to prison. So good choice by Candy at the death, and a fitting way, I think. If Mandy Miller was going to end her acting career, at least she gets to do it triumphantly with this great moment. Time to show you the version of the film I've got for this. I've got the recent Blu-ray release by Indicator, and as with any Indicator film, there are an absolute bucket load of features. I've not really gone into them. I have watched the audio commentary though. It was done by Hammer expert Jonathan Rigby, BFI curator Josephine Botting, and cultural historian John Johnston. Now, the weird thing about Josephine Botting being mentioned there is that I don't actually remember a woman speaking on this track. Maybe she popped up for like 10 seconds and I don't remember it, but all I remember is two guys talking for the duration of the movie. They're very good though. They're both very knowledgeable about the film. At least one of them counts it as one of his favourite Hammer thrillers, and this is my favourite type of commentary track, just two people sat talking like friends, and they're talking about individual scenes as well. They're not just rabbiting on about the film with seemingly little relevance to what's going on the screen. Those can be frustrating commentary tracks to watch, but this was a good one. So let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give The Snorkel. We got 1, 2, 2.5 bloody axes out of 5. That is my average score. It's not a bad movie. It's not destined to become one of my favourite films by any means, but it improves as it goes on. I wasn't massive on it in the first half. Second half, though, there's a lot to enjoy, and the film certainly finishes very strongly. It is a little bit lacking in terms of its characters, and the motivations of the killer are a little bit weird, but yeah, it's not bad. So that's all for today. I'll be back soon with another Hammer review. I think my next one is going to be a film called Cash on Demand. Until next time, cheerio.